Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It is in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any Watchbox watch. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, I'm reviewing a watch that I've reviewed before, and I don't like to retrace my steps unless I have something new to share. Well, in this case, we have an exceptionally early and well-preserved example of the Patek Philippe Chronograph 5070J-001. And when this watch is a great reference for a well-preserved example, as well as an insight into what the early 5070s were like, I feel truly we do have new information to share in this review. First, a little bit of history. The 5070 was launched at Basel 1998 as the direct successor to the long-ago discontinued 1463, which was discontinued roughly around the turn of the 1970s. Now, that watch could practically fit inside this one, as this was a giant by the standards of dress watches in the 90s. At 42 millimeters in diameter, its only real size comparables were watches like the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore, the IWC Portugueser, or, now don't laugh, the Panerai Luminor. That's pretty much it. By late 90s standards, this was a giant, but it was designed with an even bigger watch in mind, as this model, right down to the dial design and the case, was inspired by the 1950s reference 2512, an enormous 55 millimeter split seconds chronograph. So maybe this was the mid-size version of that. Regardless, it's big, but it wears small because of one important element. Though 42 millimeters in diameter, it's only 48.5 millimeters from lug to lug. A modern watch of this size would be over 50 lug to lug. It's also fairly thin at 11.8 millimeters thick, but Patek was looking to the 21st century with this design because the lug spacing is 21 millimeters, and in general, broader lug spacings are hallmarks of more modern watch designs. Taking a look on the wrist, you can see it's broad, flat, and saucer-like. It doesn't overlap the edge of my wrist. In fact, it fits fairly well. I could recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. The stiffness of the strap is exaggerating the tightness right here. That will ebb as the strap breaks in. You can see the watch would easily fit underneath the cuff. Not only is it under 12 millimeters thick, but it has this triple-stepped pagoda-like bezel that allows the sleeve to ramp up over its side. The strap is large rectangular scale alligator leather on the top, matte finish. It has a folded edge, a monotone stitch. It's calfskin on the bottom. It is a new Patek Philippe factory strap. You can see it has pull tab spring bars. So you just pull the tab with your nail and you pop the strap right off without tools. Here we have a folding clasp, single fold, yellow gold to match the watch. And it features the Calatrava cross externally. That's the symbol of the company, which you will likewise see on the push-down crown. The watch with its push-down crown and screwed-in case back has a 30-meter water resistance rating. And they were thoughtful here. They even gave you a little recess or kerf underneath the crown, so you could easily slip your nail in and pop the crown out for setting. The watch includes a little screw fixing mechanism to hold the buckle to the strap. So that's a nice touch. It's a little bit tougher to accidentally separate the two. Taking a quick look at the case, this is one of the reasons I wanted to highlight the example here. The warranty card, or the certificate of origin at the time of sale for this watch, is dated as of 1/6/2000. So this watch was indubitably made no later than 1999. And you could see back in the late 90s, these hallmarks were still being stamped. The precious metal hallmarks were still being stamped laterally on the flanks of the case and the lugs themselves, rather than underneath as they would be later on. So that is an interesting feature that also highlights how well preserved this watch is. You can see the first thing that goes with these 5070s is the fluting of the lugs and the sharpness of the bezel. And you could see that the lug fluting is remarkably intact. If it's ever been refinished, it's been refinished sparingly and professionally, because this looks as good as the day the case left Geneva. And yes, this does feature the Patek Philippe maker's mark. It is their own case made in-house. You can see that the lug profile is sharply broken out from the case band. These lugs were made separately from the case, inserted into drilled slots in the case, welded on, and then evidence of the weld would have been removed by hand to create that pleasing sharp break. A very traditional, laborious, handcrafted process is necessary. So this case is handcrafted. The chronograph pushers are rounded rectangles, and everything is of high polish. You can see why I say the sharpness of the bezel goes when this watch is overly polished. The edge of the case and then the two steps of the bezel give it a staircase-like or compressed pagoda profile that's intricate and part of the design conceit that helps to disguise the disparity between the movement and the watch itself. So we've got this triple-stepped bezel, and then we've got multiple concentric tracks outboard for reading chronograph and minutes, chronograph seconds, fractions of seconds, and minutes. And then inboard of that, there's a tachymeter scale that can be used with the chronograph to gauge, for example, the speed of a car over a kilometer. But you add all of these concentric circles and the steps of the bezel, then you look at the center dial and you realize how close together the registers are. And that's right down to the caliber CH2770, which is based on the historic Lemania 2310. The 2310 was designed in the 1940s. And so 27 millimeters was quite large for movement back then, but on a watch of this size, a number of deft styling elements are necessary to disguise that disparity between movement and case size. And I have to say, they succeeded. There's a lovely gilt golden printing on the dial, and then the numerals as well as the hands are all yellow gold. We have leaf-style hands for all but the chronograph, which features a counterweighted lancet-style seconds. The dial is a matte black, which is anti-reflective and easy on the eye. And then the dial is beautifully balanced, so you can cut it, and it has bilateral symmetry if you trim it down the center. Also worth mentioning with this watch is the fact that on the reverse side, we have caliber 2770, which is that Lemania, but it is not the same that you would find on something like an Omega Speedmaster of the pre-Moon era. This has been heavily modified. And by that, I mean the power reserve goes from 48 hours to 60. The mobile stud index is replaced by a free-sprung gyromax regulator. The flat hairspring is replaced by an overcoil hairspring. It's adjusted in 6 positions, and it's finished with Geneva hallmark levels of detailing and execution. So that's a big deal, and these watches are individually quite rare, as this model was made for 4 years and then discontinued. They went in turn yellow gold, white gold, rose gold, and platinum. And Patek could make about 250 per metal per year, so figure there's about 1,000 of these in the world. And because this movement was Lemania-based, there were constraints on its fabrication and finishing that didn't exist on the later in-house 29535. So the movement itself, its delivery and execution was part of the process that slowed down production of these watches. So you've got that overcoil adjusted in 6 positions, so the hairspring breathes concentrically in any position, which helps the timing of the watch and mitigates against the effects of gravity on timing. We have here a column wheel lateral clutch layout. You can see that the lateral clutch is fully visible and has a wonderful golden chaton for the driving wheel, which is a lovely vintage pocket watch inspired touch. The column wheel in Geneva tradition has been capped, and like many elements of aesthetic finishing, the capped column wheel has its roots in a functional purpose, the idea being under shock, the horns of the levers and the clutch couldn't pop out of the crenellated peaks of the column wheel if it were capped, so that was the original point of that. Anglage, which here is delivered on both steel and brass components, was originally designed to remove the burrs and the sharp edges on the periphery of bridges, so that if a screwdriver or a tool hit the edge of the bridge, it wouldn't break off a metal fragment that could become enmeshed in the train. This beats away at 18,000 vibrations per hour, which is nice, stately 6 beats per second or 2.5 hertz, or pardon me, 5 beats per second or 2.5 hertz. We have a lovely chronograph bridge, and it is a semi-instantaneous jump. A wonderful movement with reams of history and no longer available in the era of in-house Patek Philippe watches. The only modern feature it really doesn't have is a hacking seconds function. The feel of the column wheel and the sound is world-class, and you can see that the steel components have been beveled on their edges and then satinated across their tops. We have Côte de Genève across the bridges, perfectly aligned, although there are very few stripes as there are few bridges. We have engine turning on the base plate. We have black polished screw heads with chamfered slots and circumference, and we have satination on all of the wheels. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of this particularly early and well-preserved Patek Philippe 5070J.